All right, thank you. Welcome back to Sunrise Daily, where we focus our attention now on the National Health Bill. And we're joined now by Dr. Philip Njemanze, who is the Managing Director of Global Profile Alliance. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much.
We're looking at this National Health Bill, which, by the way, the Senate did pass it in February. Yes. And according to the chairman of that Senate committee, Senator Ifeanyi Okowa, he says that the new health bill will help Nigeria to achieve what he described as universal health service and also meet the Millennium Development Goals targets alongside improving the health sector. But this has been subject of controversy way before it was passed, and perhaps it still is now. But what do you think, having passed this by the Senate?
Yes, well, I don't see which text Senator Okowa was reading. If it's the same bill he passed, there is no way it can achieve all those objectives in any way, shape, or form. What is in this bill, as we have said and underscored repeatedly, is that this bill, in section now called Section 50 of this bill, it actually addressed some of the concerns which we had raised about human egg trafficking. But in a very tricky way, they inserted that provision back into the definition of human egg gametes trafficking. So what has happened is that they really did not make any change to Section 50, which was formerly Section 51. So the human egg trafficking is still in the bill, current bill. What does this do? If you go to the definition of tissue in the interpretation section, it says tissue means human tissue and includes flesh, bone, gland, an organ, skin, bone marrow, or blood fluid, but excludes blood or a gamete. A gamete can be sperm and it can be an ovarian egg. So it excluded this. So the provisions that prevents the trafficking in human eggs and sperms does not address this. This bill does not exclude it from being trafficked.
If it included it?
It did include, yes. Well, if it included it, what it means is that if you go to Section 48 of this bill, it says, subject to the provisions of Section 53, a person shall not remove tissue, blood, or blood product from the body of another person for any purpose except. So what it means is that if you are referring to tissue, it does not include an ovarian egg. So if you are referring to the definition of tissue, and it's not done in medicine anywhere in the world, how can you define a tissue and say that a gamete, ovary, or sperm is not part of that tissue definition?
And you don't think this is an oversight?
No, it is not. It is a deliberate. This bill was architected by human egg traffickers. And we have said this categorically. If you go to Section 51, you will get convinced that what we have said still remains. Let me read it to you. A person shall not remove tissue from a living person for transplantation to another living person or carry out the transplantation of such tissue except in a hospital authorized for that purpose and on the written authority of the medical practitioner in charge of clinical services in that hospital or any other medical practitioner authorized by him or her, or in the case where there is no medical practitioner in charge of the clinical services at that hospital, a medical practitioner authorized thereto by the person in charge of the hospital. The medical practitioner stated in subsection 1B shall not be the lead participant in the transplant for which he has granted authorization under this subsection. Did you hear me say a donor? So the doctor is the one authorizing that the organ of somebody should be removed and transplanted to another person without the person who owns the organ to say that I want my organ to be given to another person.
So are you saying that we should have seen something similar to 48B, where it talked about, maybe A or B,
yes,
where it talks about with the informed consent of the person?
Yes, that would have been so, but even this provision of Section 48, it's also another trick. You see that in Section 48 it says, so it's if 8B, that the consent may be waived for medical investigations and treatment in emergency cases. So that
but
means
it's in accordance with the prescribed protocols by the appropriate authority. Who is this?
we prescribe, well, the tissue transplanting organ authority.
Doesn't the person have any responsibility in this case, in this waiving responsibility?
That is the problem. And in order to make this that's why we feel the whole bill was a criminal act. It's a criminal act. It's not even just a medical oversight. What has happened is that the emergency treatment is made free. That means when you arrive at the hospital, you declare that I have an emergency. You get free care. But that free care waives your right to your organs.
Dr. Njemanze.
That's the point.
Dr. Njemanze, that's not what it's saying here.
Read
now,
it.
Let's look at that section.
Yes,
48
read it
again. With the informed consent of a person with whom the tissue from whom 48.
48.
Section 1A.
Yeah, 1A.
With the informed consent of a person from whom the tissue, blood, or blood product is removed or granted in prescribed manner.
In prescribed manner. But look at the section B. What does that say?
Yeah, that the consent may be waived for medical investigation and treatment in emergency cases. Now, the question here is,
yes,
I believe the drafters of this bill would have thought about the fact that someone might come into the hospital in a situation where the person cannot respond to anything and he needs to be saved. And you're still demanding that you're saying he's criminal. Is that criminal statement you put in there that made me stop you?
Let me tell you why it is criminal is this. There is no instance whereby you waive the right of the person to his organs. Even if the person is in a critical mode, that you can't respond, or there is a next kin, there is a relative.
We have emergency cases where the next of kin, it's impossible to reach the next of kin. Someone is rushed into the hospital and needs to be taken care of.
But the point is, when you waive that right, that means the organ can be taken. And that's not done. That's not done anywhere. And that is what Section 51 empowers them to do. Do you know what this could do? If you go through this bill and go to Section 20 is the one that gives you a free emergency service. Okay? Now, when you go to section, section, if you take a look towards the, that should be page 3 of what you have. You will see that what is happening is, yeah. You can see that if you arrive at the hospital.
That should be page 4.
Page 4, yeah. Yeah.
Section 20?
Yes, section 20.
This has to do with emergency medical treatment to the detriment of Nigerians, is that it?
Yes, when you declare an emergency, let's say, when you say emergency is free, a person has a blood pressure of 160, 100. He does not go to the hospital because it's not perceived. When he has a BP of 200 over 120 and he's dyspneic, he's feeling very bad, he's rushed to the hospital. At that point, you are saying that he is going to get free medical care. At that point, he can die of a stroke at any time, just because you declared free emergency treatment. And because you declared the free, he would have gone long since, 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, when he had 160, 100, and go through the normal insurance system in order to make sure he provides for his care.
Does this preclude them from going when, say, for medical regular checkup? Do they have to wait for emergencies?
But that's what you do when you declare it free. When you do that, whether you like it or not, health is an economic issue. When he wants to go and say, I could go and get my treatment, but if I go now and they measure my BP is 160, 100, and I'm saying it's an emergency, they're not going to give me a free service.
No, but doctors will tell you that, look, you need to check regularly. Don't wait until an emergency because you never know if you'll survive.
Yes, but the problem is when you make the word free, that's the problem. You are putting an incentive to make people seek care at an emergency point. What you should have done, if this bill was well intended, what you should have done is to create a fund that actually pays the premium for any emergency treatment. So once you do that, nobody will go and fall into a traffic accident because he wants to get emergency care.
You see, that
And that's what is done in
that
every
is-
other country.
You see, that is now a question of choice. You sit down and you're going down the drain. You're losing your life gradually, and you're waiting for the moment when you get it free. Is that not your choice?
No. I think when you look at, okay, let me give you an example of what happens to Nigerians in the U.S. When Nigerians move people from here to the U.S. to receive medical care, some of them will wait and take the person to an emergency condition, in an emergency condition to a county hospital to get some care, because they will now get attention. And do you know what that results to? Many of those people die. Many of those people die in those emergencies. That's why you have a high mortality rate of people who have left the shores of Nigeria to seek medical care, even in the United States. So you can't do it here. When you have poverty in the system, what you should have done, if Okowa was well-intended, what he could have done is to provide that everybody will have universal health insurance coverage, so that it does not matter. Wherever you go, whether you have an accident, you will get health care. That will achieve what he is stating, which he did not do in this bill.
Well, he's your colleague, and well, he's a medical doctor, so he understands some of these issues. Well, what beats me is that, well, he doesn't seem to be in the know as to what you're trying to espouse here, because when that bill was passed, I think that was when it passed the third reading on the 19th of February, he said that, well, the bill is aimed at also regulating organ transplant as well as provide health care services for Nigerians of all diseases, including men, women, youth, and the aged, as well as the disabled. So he's telling Nigerians that this document here, when finally it is law, it will help regulate organ transplant and things which you are also talking about. But now you bring in all of the sections out to say, well, it doesn't seem that way. It seems, on the contrary, it is to help people who are dealing in organ transplant. But from what I gathered from Dr. Ifeanyi Okowa, that's not the case.
Well, actually, he's wrong. He is dead wrong, because what Okowa did in this bill was to make sure that all hospitals in Section 13, if you read it, within 24 months of the passage of this bill, that this bill becomes law, will be closed in Nigeria. 98% of the private hospitals, Christian hospitals in Nigeria, will be closed. Why? Because he sets a standard. The certificate of standard is not based on your medical practice expertise, the nurses, the doctors, no, or pharmacists or lab scientists. What is based on is how big your corridor is, the construction, how wide, how was the rooftop. You can't practice medicine here.
But, I think that there is a clause, because he said that the health law mandates closure of all church mission hospitals, Islamic organization hospitals, private hospitals, and community hospitals in Nigeria on the basis of not conforming with the International Building Code for hospitals. So there's a caveat there. So if they meet these international building codes for hospitals, then they stay.
No, let me tell you what the International Building Code for hospital is. One, the plumbing system, electricity system, the wiring, the corridors, how big your window is. If you go by that, 98% of the hospitals in Nigeria, private, most public hospitals, community hospitals, will not meet that standard. And you have to mandate them closed. What will you have open? You have a chain of foreign hospitals, or built with large capital. People coming here to build these hospitals that we are 5-star hotels type hospitals. And when they do this, they are not building it for Nigerians, I can tell you that. They are building it for hospital places where they can have organ tourism. And that is why the provisions of this law was made in such a way that they can.
Organ tourism, meaning people coming
to Nigeria to receive organs. Absolutely. And that's exactly what these provisions of this law provide them, the level playing field, the conditions to do that.
Is that the same standard for all the other hospitals, apart from the religious ones?
No, both religious and private hospitals will be closed.
Across board?
Across the board. They will be closed, because you will not have an option. than to go to these hospitals. When you arrive there in an emergency, you waive your right to your organs. Who will accept that? That is impossible to accept.